Hi everyone, Richard here from HMO Sales Expert, supported living series where we're trying to chat to experts and sort of work backwards, reverse engineer it. It's not my specialist field, but if you ask the right questions to the experts, and hopefully we can learn along the way. So I'm sat here with Max Rayner. How are you, Max?
I'm good, thanks for having me. You all right?
Yeah, so we've known each other for quite a good few years, and I've watched steadily as you've immersed yourself mainly with the supported living platform in the industry. So do you want to kind of, well, first of all, this is just the intro really of kind of what you do in the space and what your specialism is.
Yeah, so a lot of people know us from the supported living platform, which is a supported living education and mentorship platform to help people learn about supported living, which is what we're doing today.
Yeah.
But first and foremost, we are developers in the space. So education is secondary to what we do. We're out there, we're developing, we're winning awards for what we do. We've got an investment company called Stuart Clinton Property.
Yeah.
I'm the co-founder and director of that.
I think that's when we first got in touch.
Which is where we first got in touch. And I think we were looking, this is a long time ago, at some of our first projects for you to actually sell for us. So I know you say you're the HMO sales expert, but hopefully over the course of the series, you'll also be the supported living sales expert.
Anybody who sees, any stock at the moment that's out there in HMO or property stock, a lot of them have leases attached to them. And what I'm trying to establish is, what's the value of those leases? What's the security for the investors? And if I can start to understand that,
sure,
as somebody who's therefore being responsible to value them and sell them, then obviously we're able to portray that to our investors and make safer choices on behalf of the people that are buying the stock.
100%, yeah.
But it all begins with sort of literally chatting to people like yourself. And so, how did you get into it? Sort of over that time frame, moving from the developer into that space, because it's a good few years now as well, isn't it?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I guess like everyone, and I think a lot of people are turning to it now as an alternative and trying to understand it as an alternative. But let's break it down. So, we didn't actually look for supported living. There wasn't, at the time when we started doing it 4, 5, 6 years ago, much education around it at all. COVID hit and we were looking for alternatives. We were mainly a HMO-based investment company at that time.
Yeah.
And like everyone, I guess, we were just getting a little bit fed up with increasing interest rates. We were getting fed up with repairs and maintenance costs. We were getting fed up with voids. We were getting fed up with agents maybe putting a bunce on repairs or lying to us a little bit, or someone not paying rent and them not chasing. So, Alex and I quit. My business partner, Alex Baker, we quit our jobs to do property full time back in 2017, 2018. And we were just getting fed up of, I guess, the uncertainty to plan cash flow. So we looked for alternatives, and it was around sort of COVID, pre-COVID. Mental health crisis was on the telly, homelessness crisis. We were very good at our HMOs at the time. They're probably a little bit older now, but at the time we invested a lot in them and tried to hit that 5% top of the market co-living style. And we were like, if we could use our skills to this, but put it to a slightly different use, what could that use be? And we started chatting to a few other developers that were working with registered providers, which we'll dive into a little bit in this, because I know there's some confusion around that. Care providers and local authorities about repurposing what we're doing for better use. Now, ours is a bit of a personal touch because our development company's named after our dads, Stuart and Clinton. Obviously, I'm Max and Alex. We've got a company called Stuart Clinton Property. Sadly, they passed away when we were younger. So adult male mental health was very close to our hearts. So that was what we explored. And it turns out there was this whole industry called supported living where you could use your properties, repurpose them, readapt them for use for vulnerable people.
How do you begin that process? Because there'll be a lot of people watching this where, so you've made that decision, but then how many frogs do you have to kiss along the way? And how do you arrive now where you're at the point where you understand the breakdown of you said to me before when we first arrived this morning that you look at so people throw properties to you and you look at the lease and you go, oh my God, that lease or this. How do you go through that process of really understanding the industry? And maybe you can't answer it in one question, but making a decision, both of you, to sort of, this is what we're interested in, this is what we want to go into, both from commercially and also wanting to do it as you've described, sort of to not to give back or to do good, but it's a passion of yours, isn't
100%.
it? And where do you start though? Where do you so how do you find what works without exposing the risks of the fact that you just don't know at that point?
Well, I guess it's like every investment that you should look at doing. We start with demand. What is the demand and where is it? So that's where you would speak to local authorities and find out, okay, what sorts of people are on your list? Is it mental health? Is it learning disabilities? Is it children? We can look at the social housing stuff, and is it homelessness, asylum seekers? All of these people are on waiting lists for properties.
Yeah.
And I think it's about demand, but it's also about what is passionate to you. We talk about passion, but property's hard anyway. No matter if you choose HMO, service accommodation, commercial conversions, whatever strategy you choose, it's hard. So choose something you enjoy. First of all, Alex and I started with mental health because it resonated to our hearts. Adult male mental health.
Yeah.
We've branched out from that now. We've done females, we've done autism, we've done learning disabilities, but start with something you're passionate about that resonates to you.
Do you think the issue, a bit of a side, as you've been talking there, it just popped into my head, but a lot of people come into this supported living, social housing lease aspect purely to solve that. You know, they're trying to have the next biggest thing in property from a financial perspective.
100%.
And everything's sold on, you know, the terminology around that. But you speak to very few people who actually come at it from the core passion of, you know, I'm actually choosing to invest in supported living because I've made a conscious decision, irrespective of
100%.
Yeah, so it seems.
I mean, look, the people have to matter, the cause has to matter, the impact that you have has to matter. If you do a good job, money's a byproduct.
Yeah.
That's like anything you do. You know, if you look at the people, what I always love this interview that I see about Richard Branson when he was talking about the companies that he was making, and he doesn't think this is how much money I'm going to make. He thinks this is the impact that I'm going to have, and this is how much better I'm going to make it than everyone else.
Yeah.
And if he does that,
Money
he
will
does
come.
well.
Yeah.
Money comes. It was like me and Alex when we first started. We were going around a few different care providers. We got in touch with a few care providers, and they let us in to their properties to have a look around.
Okay,
and they were people that we were going to work with. And when we understood the business model behind it, the lease structure, the rents, I was looking around and I was like, Alex and I had the budget to create these amazing high-end co-living spaces. We could apply the same budget to this and blow it out the park.
Yeah,
and that's exactly what we did.
Right.
We applied that co-living style.
The standard of,
Standard. Of course, there are adaptations that has to change, and the robustness is a bit more depending on you know what residents you've got in there, what type of support
then
you're
presumably
providing.
do you then become top of the queue for people to actually want
100%.
to work with you then?
And then the care providers love our properties. They've never seen anything like it. The families of the residents in the properties are contacting us saying, oh my God, this is the best property they've ever been. And then you're top of the list on the council to fill the properties. Or we're not, we're sort of behind the scenes, but the care provider or the RP is at the top of the list for the council. They want more of your stock.
Yeah.
So it's just about doing it. I know we're rambling a bit, but it's about doing it properly first, not just coming into it to make a higher return.
And then from my perspective then, right, so for example, because developers need to sell to keep things moving 100%. Along. So then, you know, you're coming at it from that core. So I need to portray, look, this isn't just a property with a lease attached to it. This is actually, you know, you're buying into all of that passion and experience that Max 100%. Has got. Come and join the party, and even if that investor at the very end is just looking on a net yield return basis,
100%.
At least they know that someone passionate has set that product up.
100%. And then you start looking at, okay, we all need to work with investors in property, right? And even if you're lucky enough to have the money there to do your first, second, third, fourth and fifth project, it'll run out. So you need investors if you're looking to scale in property. My God, is it easier to raise money when you're talking about the impact you're having and the people's lives you're changing and the programs that the care providers are putting in place for these residents to get back on their feet.
That just doesn't exist. The shit that gets sent out across social media and all the WhatsApp groups, it's just, here's a property, here's a lease, and there's 3 property sources in the chain. So, and they have got no idea the genesis 100%. Of that requirement, demand.
100%. 100%. So making the returns is about understanding it. In my back to the returns point, because we do talk about passion and we do talk about impact, but at the end of the day, this isn't a charity. We're here to run a business, and if the business makes money, then we can invest more and we can do more and grow and scale and vice versa. If it doesn't make money, if the returns aren't high enough, then I understand it's obviously going to put people off.
Yeah.
So in my experience, if I look at my HMO stock compared to my supported living stock, the returns on my supported living stock are higher. If I look at it from a property by property basis and I buy a HMO property for the same and spend the same on it, I buy a supported living property for the same and spend the same on it, my net return is higher and my net cash flow is higher. The reason being is because there is a business element that is backing that lease and a government element that's backing that lease. I think that this leads us very nicely onto the conversation of the guaranteed rent situation, which I'll address in a minute. But ultimately, with HMOs and other types of investment stock, you're relying on one person that has a job to pay you money to rent that piece of space. Sometimes they can't, sometimes there's problems. And with Labour's policy that's about to come in, who knows what's going to happen with that side of things. With this, the money is coming via the government, via the local authority, through a registered provider into you. Well, actually, through the resident who has an AST with a registered provider and then into your pocket.
Right.
So there's an element of government, well, it is government backed and government approved.
Yeah.
But also there's a business in the middle that if you do your due diligence right, which is another thing that we can address, that then make sure that money comes to you, which in my opinion is a lot more risk-free, not fully risk-free, but is a lot lower risk. Do
you think that one of the issues that causes a kind of a barrier to entry for a lot of people is the fact that with a property that's developed properly for supported living, you can't over leverage that asset because lending's reduced, interest rates are higher, loan to value is often different, and the way they calculate value is often different. So in the HMO industry, they're still ripe for over leveraging. People can come in and do BRRs all over the place. You know, they can find a 3-bed terraced house, 6-bed HMO, get Shorebrook, and they've created that BRR. And they're not actually looking at the pound for pound ratio between a supported living property giving them a net return and that because all they care about is the BRR, isn't it?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So with the supported living, if you're creating a dedicated, adapted supported living property, with the same spec and that, but you're putting a lease in place, the BRR element becomes more difficult. So it rules out a lot of people. But actually, if you've got capital and you're doing a pound for pound shootout between, do you want to buy a HMO or do you want to buy a supported living? It's a no-brainer.
I mean, look, you can get BRR. It depends how you buy, right? But at the end of the day, yes, I think in my experience, there is a little bit more money left in. The loan to values are different. The appetite for lending is different. It's not necessarily a commercial product as of yet. It's seen as quite niche.
But that is just, it is what it is. And so the thing is with the industry, the amount of people that execute a BRR on a HMO and then whack a lease in place after the events happened because, they understand that product. But the motivation and driving factors for anything to do with supported living needs to be where your journey started, rather than people looking at it on loan to values, numbers.
Ignore all that.
Ignore all that
to begin with, and just dig in and understand it and learn about what you're doing, because BRR, in my opinion, is good to be able to leverage and scale, but the last 2 years with the interest rates, people have felt the pinch of doing things like that, and actually having a portfolio that's 50%, 60% leverage as opposed to 100 or 110 and stuff, because actually these empty HMOs, them day one, all shiny, brand new, this is your experience. Okay, they might sell for that premium, but after the bank's gone and valued it day one, looking all shiny with the new rents, once that's a bit tired, 3, 4, 5 years later, that commercial value hasn't really moved. And that gap between the commercial value and the bricks and mortar value could be quite big. And actually what they can sell for.